Okay, so to look at agriculture and the geography of the global food system. Obviously, the importance of agriculture is immense. All humans depend, directly or indirectly, on agriculture for their survival. We can think of it as the cultivation of domesticated crops and the raising of domesticated animals. Agriculture remains the most important economic activity in the world, using more land than any other activity and employing about 40% of the working population globally. This is hugely important. First, through the theme of region, we can look at peasant grain, root, and livestock farming and its different regional variations. Peasant, we can think of as a small-scale farmers who own their own fields sometimes, rely chiefly on family labor, produce both for their own subsistence and for the sale and market, often represent a distinctive folk culture and socioeconomic class strongly rooted in the land. Dominant grain crops in these regions are wheat, barley, sorghum, millet, oats, maize, lots of vegetables, fruits as well. Common cash crops, cotton, flax, hemp, coffee, and tobacco. These farmers also raise herds of cattle, pigs, sheep, and in South America even llamas and alpacas. Here's a picture of a peasant woman in the Democratic Republic of the Congo, their child on her back, illustrating the importance of women labor in African food production. How there's no time out for child rearing. Paddy rice farming being another very important regional agriculture production method. Cultivation of rice on a paddy, or in other words, a small flooded field enclosed by mud dikes, practiced in humid areas of the Far East. Paddy rice farm of 3 acres, we can think roughly as 3 football fields, is usually adequate to support one family. The system of irrigation can deliver water when and where it's needed. It's the key to success. Sometimes large amounts of fertilizer must be applied. Other times there's natural fertilizers used. In this sense, it's why it must be applied, but not necessarily chemical fertilizers. Paddy farmers often plant and harvest the same parcel of land twice per year, double cropping. It's quite different than most agriculture in North America. See here, you see a picture of the paddy rice farming in Bali of Indonesia. Traditionally entails large amounts of human labors, but yields very high productivity per land unit. And we can ask ourselves what might be the disadvantage of such a system. Livestock fattening being another form of agriculture taking up a large regional distribution. Commercial type of ag that produces fattened cattle and hogs solely for their meat. In the Corn Belt of the U.S., in other words, the Midwest, farmers raise corns and soybean to feed cattle and hogs. So, large parts of Iowa, Nebraska, Oklahoma, Indiana, northward as well into the Canadian prairies. Typically, slaughterhouses are located on close to feedlots, creating a new meat producing region. Feedlots, we'll see a picture of it in here a little bit, dependent on mobile populations of cheap immigrant labor. Very tough working conditions in these operations, and farmers may breed many of the animals they fatten, especially the hogs. In the feedlot system, here you see a cattle feedlot. This is actually pretty sparsely populated compared to some of you see, especially going down the I-5 corridor, Central Valley, Harris Ranch Farms. You'll see very densely populated beef cattle. What ecological problems might such an enterprise cause? We can begin to wonder, ask ourselves. We could talk about that more down below. Suitcase farms, another regional distribution iteration of present-day agriculture. An American commercial grain agriculture, a farm on which nobody lives. Planting and harvesting are done by hired migratory crews. Found in the wheat belt of the northern Great Plains of the U.S., such highly mechanized, absentee-owned, large-scale operations or agribusinesses have mostly replaced the small husband and wife-operated American family farm. This is a huge shift in the agriculture production of our country, Canada largely as well. You have a picture of some of these highly mechanized agribusiness suitcase farmers. Some of these now are controlled automatically with GPS. Some of these large farms are owned by multinational corporations, and yet owners still often get to have a large amount of influence on land use decisions within these states. Urban agriculture, rising mode of production within modern times, seen commonly in cities in the Bay Area. Raising of food, including fruit, vegetables, even meat, milk, inside of cities. This has long been especially common in the third world. We can begin to see more of this coming back here in the global north. In China, urban ag produces 90% of the vegetables consumed in the cities. This perhaps is a bit of an inflated Chinese number. However, there are vegetables grown in the cities in China. Urban agriculture is increasingly important to family income and food security in West Africa in particular. According to the World Health Organization, the promotion of local food production in European cities will aid in reducing urban poverty and inequalities. See a great picture here from Madagascar, beautiful urban plots, a critical food source for many African city dwellers. Farming the waters, somewhere where we don't usually think of a region with agriculture, but in this case it's known as aquaculture, or the cultivation under controlled conditions of aquatic organisms, primarily for food, but also for scientific and aquarium uses. The turn of the 21st century, aquaculture was growing nearly 4 times faster than all terrestrial animal food production sectors combined. Here we have a map of global aquaculture and fisheries. Aquaculture is expanding rapidly, especially in China. You see in the deep purple here some of their vast amounts of tons, over 27 million. And they also mapped out here is the exclusive economic zone, EEZs, also the site of the most commercial fishing, which has greatly depleted wild fish stocks. So once you're about 200 miles off the coast, it's free game for fishing from boats from other nations. The cost of aquaculture, however, discharge from fish farms can pollute nearby aquatic ecosystems. There's introduction of antibiotics, artificial feeds, also can introduce non-native fish. It's a big problem in the Pacific Northwest with introduced Atlantic salmon interfering with native salmon and their habitats. Here you have a mariculture, just aquaculture in saline environments. This is in Malaysia, fish farming. The barrels there help the pens float. To the theme of mobility, we can look at the ancient centers of plant domestication. Pretty interesting, both centers of origin of food production, also the corresponding, in some cases, with the most productive agriculture areas of the modern world, in some cases not. Labor mobility, a very important part of agriculture, more than any other modern economic endeavor, is constrained by the rhythms of nature. Farmers need to mobilize a large labor force for harvesting crops. Keeping a year-round workforce raises farm production costs. So the use of migrant workers has been central to the growth of profitability of farming in the U.S., where there's been employed cultural and racial stereotypes to depress farm wages and also tighten employers' control over farm workers. By no means only in the U.S. Here you have a picture of the migrant farm worker, in this case in southern Spain, African immigrants harvesting lettuce, very common there, and it's very critical to the production of the global food system overall, especially in Europe. Globalization theme. We can be asked, will the world be fed? Today, nearly 1 billion people are malnourished. Saddening, very saddening, some to the point of starvation. Almost every year, food shortages occur somewhere in the world, and yet food production has grown more rapidly than the world population over the past 50 years. This is quite a conundrum, quite a contradiction. Here we see a map of the worldwide hunger. And again, while food supplies outpace population growth, many of the worlds continue to suffer. And we can ask ourselves, what geographic patterns does this map reveal? Why are people going hungry? To a great extent, international political economics, not food shortages. It's a case of maldistribution causing hunger and starvation. international trade favoring farmers of wealthier countries through government subsidies. These are massive, massive government subsidies, billions and billions of dollars, mostly funneled to large corporate farms. Agribusiness, as we mentioned, many third world countries do not grow enough food to feed their populations, cannot afford to purchase enough imported food to make up the difference. Agribusiness, again, highly mechanized, large-scale farming, usually under corporate ownership. This raises the importance of looking at monoculture, raising of only one crop on a huge tract of land in agribusiness, similar to the wheat fields we saw, or the potato fields in Idaho. Genetically modified crops, the plants whose genetic characteristics have been altered through recombinant DNA technology. It's a very pressing issue on a global scale, both ecologically, politically, socially. Agribusinesses are often able to patent the processes and resulting genetically engineered organisms, and then claim legal ownership of new life forms. The use of Roundup-ready seeds has resulted in the emergence and spread of so-called superweeds. These have resistance to increasing doses of Roundup herbicide, and the use of pesticides increases from there. Here we have worldwide use of genetically altered crops, plants, especially corn and soybeans. The diffusion has occurred despite concerns of health scientists, environmentalists, and consumers. What problems might arise? How can these be so rapidly expanding when there's so much public resistance? Nature culture theme can look especially at the global warming and the future of agriculture. Extreme cases, land use change over an extensive area can produce desertification. Without reductions in greenhouse gases, climate conditions will soon be significantly different than those under which humans invented agriculture. With some pros, indeed, but in most cases, in many areas, it's come with heavy cost. However, organic agriculture presents an alternative. It's a form of farming that relies on manure, mulching, biological pest control, rejects the use of synthetic fertilizers, insecticides, herbicides, GMOs. And underneath legislated regulatory standards for organic ag, state and federal governments provide organic farmers the basis for differentiating their product in the marketplace. This often leads to charging more. However, that's more aptly regarding the true cost of food. Organic food market is now the most rapidly growing and the most profitable agricultural sector. Greatly helps in reducing greenhouse gas emissions associated with conventional ag. And through the cultural landscape lens theme, we can begin to understand all sorts of different cultural landscapes related to agriculture around the world. In particular, property and field borders are often marked by fences or hedges, and the types of fences or hedges can be linked to particular groups. Here we have this archetypical hedgerow landscapes around Devon, England, historically common throughout Western Europe, but now they're disappearing as land ownership has been increasingly concentrated, centralized. Long lot farms here, consisting of long, narrow units stretching back from a road or river. Farms are elongated because each farmer then would have fertile land, water, and access to transportation facilities. So those are very neat cultural landscape. And now we can bring this down to the questions below and generate more discussion. Thanks.